Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. Your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Chevron Home Care. Thank you so much for joining us. Whoever you may be joining us, we appreciate it. And we always like to bring you and give you updates on things that matter to and with you, especially with rulings that come down here recently here in Louisiana. So we welcome back to the program Solicitor General Liz Murrow. Liz, thanks so much for joining us once again.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be with you always.
We appreciate that. Tell us a little bit about this recent ruling by this LA judge.
So Judge Doty, he's a federal judge in Monroe. We've had this case pending now for some time while we conducted discovery, which is basically an investigation into facts. And then we had an injunction hearing about whether to stop the federal government from continuing to carry out this vast censorship enterprise where it's essentially threatened and coerced into cooperation a bunch of tech companies, like tech platforms like Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, to censor American speech.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that, we learned that many, many years ago that, we have that right to be able to be heard. We have that right to be able to share our opinions and views. And this was one of those things that was being challenged. And in fact, it was being kind of told that you couldn't.
Well, it is so far reaching, it's hard to even capture the breadth of this enterprise. The federal government had created a very, very vast network, and then initially coerced and berated and forced tech companies to comply under threat of legal action against them if they didn't. And then they ended up cooperating. And so they ended up in a partnership basically with all of these tech platforms and with some private organizations that essentially exist to identify what they call misinformation or disinformation. The problem is that a lot of that information, it's just information, and it's information that people are entitled to get and not have the government censor.
And people can be able to make it, quite frankly, we have to be able to have our own discernment about what it is that we want to participate in, what we want to believe or what we don't want to believe. We in the medical field all the time talk about, be careful about where you get your medical information, but people also have the right to be able to share opinions and views about lots of different ideas and lots of different concepts.
That's right. And, one of the focal points of the facts that we discovered in this litigation was this kind of massive enterprise or effort to censor people's speech about COVID. And so it was very clear from the evidence. We have 20,000 pages of documents, but it's very clear in this evidence that the government was not permitting people to talk about true events that they believed might affect vaccine hesitancy. So, for example, my son had myocarditis from the Pfizer vaccine, and it's likely that they were preventing any discussion that I had put out on Facebook from being spread to others because they didn't want it to affect people's decision making. That's just fundamentally wrong. I mean, you're entitled to have informed consent, but they were blocking actual information that would have helped you make the right decision.
Yeah, and those decisions are personal. Those are decisions that are personal for any individual who is of age or their parents who are helping make decisions for those who are underage. They have the right to make that decision. And quite frankly, the government doesn't have a right to say what you can or cannot share or can or cannot hear. And they really don't have the right to prevent that.
That's right. That's exactly right. And, it's the scope of this enterprise is truly shocking. The director of CISA, an organization inside Homeland Security, which is created to protect critical infrastructure like pipelines or the electrical grid, had created an entire category called cognitive infrastructure so that they could justify targeting and molding what we see and think and hear. Yeah. It's very shocking, really. The scope of it is stunning.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people aren't aware. For example, I'm just a little bit in ignorance of how widespread that was. I've gotten the updates and the information, but I just had no idea how widespread that was, even as somebody who is a member of the media and shares that information. And so it's nice to know that there are people who are standing up, and it's part of what your role is here as Solicitor General, about making sure that we're standing up for what's right for everyone, but certainly in Louisiana, about what it is that we're standing up for the rights of the people and the constituents of Louisiana.
Well, thank you. I think it is critically important that we stand up for the rights of our people. That's the oath of office that we take. I took that oath even in an appointed position. So do all public officials. So did the federal officials that were engaging in the rampant violation of people's First Amendment rights. It's shocking that the government would so broadly engage in an enterprise to do this. But it is, encouraging that we have people that want to go out and fight to protect our constitutional rights. And I think that's really, really important. And we need to continue to educate our young people about how important those constitutional rights are to the continued viability of our democracy.
Yeah, and as we've got just a few seconds here left, it's important to know that the ruling is going to take place immediately, but it's not necessarily a final decision on the suit, correct?
Right. It's a preliminary injunction, which means it's early in the case. I would actually expect the government to appeal that. So there will likely be more activity in the courts on this case, even on this ruling, but there will be a lot more to follow.
I love it. Well, Liz, thank you so very much for what you do, for standing up for the rights of the people, and more importantly, for trying to figure out what's best for us in Louisiana. Thanks for coming back on to discuss this with us.
Thank you for having me. It's always good to be here, Keith.
All right, very good. And again, Solicitor General Liz Murrow, very glad that she has joined us today, giving us an update on this recent decision by the judge about this injunction. We appreciate that. And that will do it for this particular segment. Don't go anywhere. A lot more local programming right here on HTV.